What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Jamel Herring, 23 wins and 2 losses, defending his WBO Junior-Lightweight title, that's 130, against Shakur Stevenson, 16 wins and 0 losses. Now, the first thing that jumps out at me about this fight, where Jamel Herring, almost 36 years old, is making his 5th title defense against Shakur Stevenson, one of the hottest young prospects coming up. Shakur Stevenson, super young, undefeated, mentored by Terrence Crawford, managed by Jay Prince and Andre Ward. A lot of hype is surrounding Shakur Stevenson, but I'm looking at the betting odds between Herring and Stevenson, and Stevenson's going off at like a 5-1 favorite. That is giving damn near no respect to the defending champion here in Jamel Herring, who's coming off probably the biggest win of his career, certainly the most high-profile win of his career, versus Carl Frampton in pretty much Carl Frampton's retirement fight. He retired as soon as he was knocked out by Jamel Herring. Now, before that Carl Frampton title defense for Herring, there was a big narrative about Herring questioning his overall toughness because his prior defense against Jonathan Oquendo was, it was going fairly well. Herring was winning most of the early and even middle rounds, but the pressure that Oquendo was putting on, as well as him leading with the headbutting Herring, causing a cut, and then still coming in with the head to where the referee, Tony Weeks, I believe, deducted a point from Oquendo. But between rounds, this is around the 8th, 9th round, Jamel Herring basically said, "I can't see," because of the blood getting into the eye, whereas, he was able to see when he absorbed the headbutt and received the cut. The ref asked, can you see? If you could see, you could continue. He said, "I can see." Well, a couple rounds later, he said he couldn't see and basically opted for the disqualification win, which basically caused a lot of criticism to just be heaped upon Herring, including by, commentator Andre Ward and Timothy Bradley on the broadcast. So Herring's reputation kind of took a hit. I mean, he is Semper Fi. He is a Marine. So before that Jonathan Oquendo fight, Herring was seen as a high integrity guy. And all of a sudden, because of that, "I'll take the DQ win, thank you very much," people then question his toughness. Well, against Carl Frampton, Jamel Herring had a lot to prove, and prove it he did. He basically was lighting the much shorter Carl Frampton up, because Carl Frampton had his best days at 122, 126. Well, Frampton was fighting Herring at 130. He was basically getting caught by not only straight left hands, but by counter uppercuts when he would try to leap into the pocket. And Herring was also hitting the much shorter Jonathan Oquendo with that same left uppercut. It's one of Herring's favorite punches, especially against much shorter fighters. Well, with Herring versus Shakur Stevenson, we basically have southpaw versus southpaw. And although Herring does have a height advantage, it's only by a couple inches. We have 5'10 versus 5'8, not 5'4 or 5'6. Their reaches are relatively close too. Jamel Herring has a 70-inch reach versus Shakur Stevenson's 68-inch reach. And these guys, are pretty friendly with each other. They're not like buddy-buddy, but, Jamel Herring's got the same trainer as Terrence Crawford, McIntyre. And again, Terrence Crawford is pretty much a mentor to Shakur Stevenson. In fact, there was rumor that after the title defense against Carl Frampton, that if things went well for Herring, which they did, that he might even vacate his WBO 130-pound title to make way for Stevenson to then fight for the vacant belt, where Herring would then go up to 135 or take on some other challenge. I am pretty glad that that didn't happen. I'd like to see the champion and rightful challenger settle this in the ring, as opposed to the, excuse me, it's all yours, make way for the next generation. I didn't want to see that type of rollover by Jamel Herring. So I'm glad that he's standing his ground, that he's going to defend his title against the young phenom Shakur Stevenson, who could, best be described as, for all the hype that's coming with him. It's not like he's a sensational knockout artist or anything like that. He is clearly of that sweet science vein. He is basically as economical and efficient with movement as you could possibly be. Again, so He's not a super tall fighter. He's about 5'8", which is, sort of average for the division that he's now in, 130. It might be a little tall for the division, actually. It would be more appropriate at 135, 140. Then 5'8" would be a little bit more normal. So he's a little tall for 130. But again, Jamel Herring is 5'10" in the same division. But Shakur Stevenson, again, he's a southpaw, so, he's pretty tricky with the angles. But he controls range and distance with his feet and with his level changing. He's pretty nuanced, but he doesn't get out of the way of punches by like slipping or ducking or blocking. I mean, he will hold the phone, as they say. He keeps his hand up so that your power shots don't connect. But he's more so controlling range by taking one step out of range and then kind of engaging on his terms, where he'll level change and like jab to the body with his right hand or a straight left hand to the body. He does a nice varied body and head attack, so his arsenal leaves you kind of questioning what he's going to pull out of his toolbox. He's got an unpredictable punch pattern, but he's not throwing a ton of combinations. He's kind of pot-shotting a bit. But he's kind of mastering this whole, when we exchange, I'm the only one who's within range to hit you, yet being out of range, because after I throw my punches, I'm taking a step this way or circling laterally to where I'm no longer in range to be hit by you. So he's not a dancer. He's not like on the balls of his feet moving around the ring. It's not that type of movement or defense. He's not flat-footed. He's, pretty springy, but he's a step and slider. But with the timing of his stepping and sliding, it just makes it really tough for his opponents to get off, because anytime that they think they might be in range, well, they just got hit with another jab or something that disrupted their rhythm, and then Shakur Stevenson is just racking up the points round over round, where, you look at his last two fights, he's won them both by decision, and he's still pretty much in the point of his career where if somebody's got some pop in their glove, I mean, even Floyd Mayweather was getting a lot of knockouts and stoppages earlier in his career. It wasn't until he started fighting nothing but elite competition, because he was a champion in this division, that division, where he started racking up more unanimous decision wins. Well, Shakur Stevenson is very early in his career to be winning primarily by decision. He has earned a couple knockouts. He knocked out Felix Caraballo and Alberto Guevara. But, by and large, even against Christopher Diaz, who was stopped by, the current featherweight champ, or at least one of the featherweight champs, Emmanuel Navarrete. Navarrete dropped Christopher Diaz multiple times, stopped him. Well, Shakur Stevenson beat Christopher Diaz by unanimous decision. And Shakur Stevenson did hold the belt in his prior weight class, 126 featherweight, and he won it against Joet Gonzalez, again via unanimous decision. But he was fighting for a vacant belt, because that belt that he was fighting for was vacated by Oscar Valdez, who went to 130 just basically months before Shakur Stevenson would win that same belt and then also go to 130. So Shakur Stevenson, even in being champion, there are different levels of being champion. Some guys will win a belt by beating a heralded and respected champion, whereas others will earn a belt by winning it in a vacant title bout against maybe somebody that people haven't really heard of before, like at the time, Joet Gonzalez. He wasn't like some hot prospect or somebody with a lot of quality wins under his belt, but he was basically the person Shakur Stevenson had to beat to earn a title. So not all champions are equal, especially if you also don't have title defenses under your resume. But with that said, again, Shakur Stevenson is still super young, and he's already one of the better round winners, at least, with the level of competition that he's fighting currently. This is a huge step up for him. Jamel Herring, he hasn't fought anything close to this level of competition yet. Although I would like to see who his last opponent, Nakathila, ends up fighting next and how his career progresses, because he does have a pretty mighty right hand, which he also did connect with a couple significant times against Shakur Stevenson. But Shakur Stevenson also beat Jeremiah Nakathila via unanimous decision by, again, winning just about all of the rounds. Shakur Stevenson is one of the best round winners in the sport. Like Devin Haney is also one of the best round winners in the sport. Demetrius Andrade as well. Well, when you look at Shakur Stevenson's competition, not only have they been far less than elite fighters, but you look at like Toka Clary or Christopher Diaz. Look at their height compared to Jamel Herring. Jamel Herring is one of the only taller fighters that Shakur Stevenson will have fought. So while Shakur Stevenson is able to control distance against some guys who are either, a little bit shorter or much shorter than he is, how's he going to do that against Jamel Herring, who's 5'10" and has the reach advantage on him? Well, there are a lot of little nuanced things you can do, like level change and, lateral movement, certain feinting techniques where you're trying to draw a reaction by acting like you're going to punch. You could feint with your shoulders, feint with your head. Leo Santa Cruz does this thing with his hands. That could also be considered a feint. Some people are so good that they could feint with their feet. Alexander Usyk feinted with his feet brilliantly against Anthony Joshua. Well, Shakur Stevenson uses some of these nuanced tricks, so maybe that's how he'll be able to be within range of scoring points against Herring and winning some of the rounds. But I do see him having some difficulty, especially in the early to middle rounds against Jamel Herring, who again has already made a few title defenses. He won it against Masayuki Ito and then defended against Lamont Roach Jr. In fact, Jamel Herring hasn't lost since 2017, and that was via unanimous decision against Latarius Miller. So he's been on a nice run, but again, he's almost 36 years old. So what do I expect between Herring and Shakur Stevenson? Again, I expect the early rounds to be competitive. I think that Herring is actually going to win maybe 2 out of the first 3 rounds, or maybe they split 2 rounds to 2 after 4 rounds. But I really see this as being a youngin versus a damn near 36-year-old. And, people age differently depending on the weight class. 130 isn't a weight class where 36-year-olds tend to perform very well. But I do think that Jamel Herring is going to fight a pretty smart fight, again, at least for the first half of the fight. But I think that Shakur Stevenson will start to take control in the middle rounds. Again, this is southpaw versus southpaw. I think that Shakur Stevenson is going to have a more active jab. I think that Jamel Herring is going to have trouble finding Shakur Stevenson's head because of the way that Shakur Stevenson is a risk mitigator, and he's not going to jump into the pocket to allow Jamel Herring to hit him with that counter left uppercut. I just don't see those types of punches scoring for Jamel Herring. What I do see scoring are Shakur Stevenson's jabs and his left hand to the body. And I think he's going to slowly start to pick up the intensity as they get into the middle and late rounds, to where if there was any doubt as to who was winning up to maybe like the 6th round, 7th round, I expect Shakur Stevenson to be taking control by the 8th and 9th round, partially due to the skill, but also due to the age discrepancy between the two. But when we get to the scorecards, I think that the crowd or the audience watching the fight might be in for a surprise when they read the scorecards. I think that we are going to see a near even fight, maybe like 7 rounds to 5 or 8 rounds to 4 in favor of Shakur Stevenson. Some people, because of how competitive I expect this fight to be in the first half of the fight, some people might even think that Jamel Herring should edge a decision by the time we get to the scorecards. But I think that the scorecards are going to be a little bit more lopsided than our eyes are telling us. And I think that they're going to favor Shakur Stevenson more so. Basically, I think that a lot of the swing rounds are going to go Shakur Stevenson's way because of how much it matters that he wins this fight, because of what it would potentially set up in a Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez title unification, not for undisputed, but for some of the belts, title unification showdown. I just think, and I'm not trying to get into any sort of conspiracy, it's, it is business, but I think that a Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez fight is a lot sexier than a Jamel Herring versus Oscar Valdez fight. Although if Jamel Herring ends up going in there and knocking out the highly touted prospect, Shakur Stevenson, that could change all that. People's opinions on Jamel Herring will change mightily if that happens. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think, again, this is going to be a very close, tit-for-tat, round-winning style fight that will probably go to the scorecards. And again, I expect Shakur Stevenson, the huge favorite. Again, that part isn't reasonable. In terms of what the action that we're going to see in the ring, it does not justify Shakur Stevenson being that big a favorite against, again, a defending champ who's got several title defenses under his belt. I thought that betting line is just disrespectful. I'm actually tempted to just go the other way just because the odds are so outrageous. But as it stands, I'll go with the young Shakur Stevenson to pull this out with a kind of a 117 to 111 scorecard, even if we end up seeing a 115 to 113 or even 114 to 114 draw type of fight. But yeah, let me know what you think about Stevenson versus Jamel Herring in the comments. How will Stevenson basically close the distance, giving up a couple inches in height and a couple inches in reach? Do you think Jamel Herring's going to have a lot of early success in this fight? So if you're going Shakur Stevenson, which I imagine most of you will, how will Shakur Stevenson win the rounds? Assuming he's not going to knock Jamel Herring out. How will he win the rounds against Jamel Herring? Please give me your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.